Okay, hello. My name is Matthew Jimenez, and today I'm going to be doing a close reading on some of the ancient symbols found in Chris Barron's The Magical and Imperfect. So, these symbols are used throughout the story by characters in order to solve their problems. I think it'd be good for me to kind of start off with a general overlook of some of the big plot points of the story. So we have Aton, our protagonist, and his issue of not being able to speak, which is directly derived from his inability to see his mother because of her mental health issues. This is stated pretty early on in a poem on page 4 titled Mom, where Aton is kind of giving us the reasons for him not being able to speak. Throughout the story, we get this sense of the consistency of earthquakes, the possibility of a big earthquake happening. We have Malia's skin condition, the attempting to solve these problems using these ancient methods, specifically the two different types of clay that Aton's grandfather has, and then also the two different stones that Aton's grandfather attempts to give to Aton as well, one of which is meant for Malia but never actually makes it to Malia, and we'll talk about that later. We also get the talent show, the actual earthquake itself, and then somewhat of a resolution when Aton's mother does return back home. We also get this background too of the setting of baseball. Baseball is kind of paralleled with earthquakes throughout the story. So on page, early on in the story, we're given Aton's condition, and we're also given Malia's condition. Aton has a preconceived notion of what Malia's condition is before he actually meets her. A lot of the students at his school have kind of created this lore behind her existence in a means of othering her. So what I want to do is start off by looking at one of the first places in the text where Aton's grandfather actually does attempt to utilize these ancient Jewish relics. So that'll be on page 75. The poem is titled Baraket, and in this poem, Aton's grandfather entrusts him with a small emerald stone, also known as a baraket. And the baraket is meant to give Aton the confidence to be able to speak freely. And early on in the novel and verse, while Aton still does have the baraket, it does help him quite frequently be able to speak in times where he very much needs to. I want to now go to page 122, because this is the first instance where we get direct doubt, specifically from Aton's father in regards to these Jewish relics. Aton's father tells him a story of when he was younger, when he tried to utilize the clay in order to build a golem out in front of Aton's grandfather's shop, and in doing so, a storm happens and ends up washing away all of the clay, and then we get a very melancholic sense of doubt from Aton's father in regards to using these methods in order to solve what he thinks are real life problems. So this is where Professor Barron first kind of brings up this question of the modern world versus the ancient world, and it's a consistent theme throughout the entire novel. I think that it's directly brought out in regards to Aton's father and Aton's grandfather. Aton's grandfather is a very consistently faithful man, where his father is very obviously struggling with his faith. And then it's almost up to Aton and Malia to mend this generational gap and kind of fix the generational trauma that has been caused by this new dichotomy of modern versus ancient. So, the next poem that I want to look at is on page 134, and it's dealing with Malia's allergy. So, Aton has the idea to introduce the dog that he looks after, Buddy, to Malia, and in doing so, actually gives her somewhat of an allergic reaction. So, I just want to talk a little bit about nature in this and kind of how Malia acts as almost a direct insight into what is going to happen with nature. Her body is almost a physical manifestation of like nature. She's very hypersensitive to nature in a variety of different ways, and in tune with nature as well. So with that also being said, that kind of brings me to page 246 and 249, where we actually get the talent show itself, and that's kind of where we could see the reader gets to see a culmination of all of these different aspects kind of coming together in this one kind of very climactic moment. We have Aton being able to actually somewhat express himself for a moment. We have Malia being able to perform at the talent show. We have the earthquake itself. We have Malia using the clay in order to save Aton's grandfather, who during the earthquake had some issues breathing and actually starts violently coughing after the earthquake is conceded. So in that scene we kind of get to see how the modern world will eventually mesh with the ancient world. Specifically, Malia, who is kind of this representation of nature and nature's wrath, she has been able to perform in this way. We can see that Aton's grandfather, who was looked at more of the ancient ways, he has taken literal physical damage from this experience. And we also have Aton now, being very lively to some extent. So we kind of get to see this culmination of the ancient working to save the old and preserve the old, but not necessarily keep that in the forefront. The forefront is now most definitely Malia and Aton, specifically Malia, who was on the stage performing when these events happen. So we kind of get to see, a transfer of power and agency from Aton's grandfather to Malia and Aton specifically. And then eventually, as the story progresses, eventually Aton's mother does return, and we kind of get to see this sense of community being brought back into the story. With Aton's mother returning, with Aton's father attempting to be more faithful. Obviously, we have Aton's grandfather, being fully faithful now towards the end, and just kind of appreciating what he has and what the family has kind of become with the addition of Malia and her family as well. And then the final poem that I want to talk about is on page 317, and in this poem, Malia and Aton are at their special spot, and while they're there, Malia is standing inside of the creek, where she finds the small green Baraket stone. The final line of that poem is, "We look at the pool and across it into the depths of the forest, both of us looking for something we hope is real." So I think Professor Barron is doing something very crucial and beautiful with the reemerging of that stone that was lost prior to that scene. And I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to show how these two worlds of this ancient world and modern world can coexist in the present day, and kind of what that looks like. That it's somewhat of a painful experience sometimes, trying to close the gap between those two worlds, and that it's not going to be a perfect journey. It's going to be magically imperfect a lot of the time. So for me, just to, be able to see some of these specific symbols in a clear light definitely helped me just gain a deeper grasp of what was really at play throughout this novel. And I think that Professor Barron does a beautiful job of, not giving us too much, and rather kind of, leaving some of these symbols not unfinished, but unrealized, and allowing the reader to, kind of piece together the possibilities of, what some of these characters' motivations are. I hope you guys enjoyed my talk about Chris Barron's The Magical Imperfect, and some of the ancient symbols that are at play throughout the story. I hope that it's helped you guys, get a better understanding of these symbols, and hopefully it'll enhance your reading of the novel in verse in future readings. Thank you.